Hello and welcome to another episode of Collective Conversations. I'm your host, Mike Brewer, and I'm excited about today's episode. We have Konrad Koczwara. I hope I pronounced that right.
You got it pretty good. You got close.
Okay, excellent. Feel free to correct me. Konrad, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and, chat with you. Thanks for again having me.
Oh yeah, no, I've been looking forward to this because I think you have a super interesting story as it relates to bringing a service to the multifamily industry that I think is super important, especially in the context of, say, COVID and all the things that are going on in the world today. And I'm super interested in hearing about how you got to today. So if you want to take just a second to introduce yourself and maybe go back to your days getting your PhD and how that sort of manifests itself into today's offering in the multifamily space.
Yeah, sure. So I have definitely like an interesting story on how I got into real estate. And I've heard a million of these where, people didn't expect to end up in real estate, but they did. And I think mine's definitely one of them. So I was like an athlete. I played sports. I loved fitness, loved wellness, and I still do. And big believer in it. And essentially, I ended up going to get my doctorate degree in physical therapy at Northwestern Chicago. And when I started school, I was like, man, I need to start working and making some money. I basically was like, let's start a business. And, what do I know? What do I know how to do? Who do I, where do I have a big network? And I just knew a lot of fitness people. So I started a business. It was a side business just to make some extra cash where we would, bring trainers, personal trainers into buildings, luxury apartment buildings in Chicago. And what ended up happening was, we ended up just exploding, within 6 months. Some managers came up to us. They're like, you guys are always wearing those shirts in our gym. Who are you guys? And they're like, we want you to do our fitness classes. And I said, sure, let's do it, and I had no idea about how it would work, how much to charge. So I ended up figuring it out. And, shortly after we had probably 25 buildings, and then by the time I graduated, we were doing almost $1 million in revenue. So, and I was in school 9 to 5, which is crazy. So the fact that we grew that fast was very interesting, right? So I ended up, and this is where actually, that was my old business. And now my current business, Elevated Living, it took a whole different turn from where I started in the beginning. And a lot of it came from all the problems I would hear from property managers, right? So I would deal on the property level. So I would be hearing all the issues that, they're dealing with, that, old technology they're using from the medieval times, I call it. How they're doing amenity reservations through Microsoft Outlook, and all types of things. This is a way back when, right? So, so a few things I realized that kind of led me to create Elevated Living, those pivotal things. So the first one was this: I realized that my business 8 years ago was a problem, right? So my business model was for every business like mine in fitness, there was 8 other industries that had one service, that had one app, that required one username, one password. And I was seeing all this, the managers were telling me, oh yeah, I have a vendor for this. And I actually moved into one of the high rises when I graduated, and they called Konrad to book a dog groom. You have to email this lady her personal Gmail on the flyer in the pet spa to, book a dog groom, to, book a house clean. We have this housekeeping company that has their own app. And on top of that, you had, another app for a social feed where residents can post and sell furniture. Then you had a separate app for maintenance requests and rent payment, right? So it was just all over the place, right? And that was me, my aha moment where I was like, man, this is not sustainable for the on-site team, right? And to take it further, right, to kind of explain it even more is, the biggest thing I realized was, imagine, Mike, you're a property manager, and imagine you have eight of me cloned, and all 8 of Konrads have different apps and different services, and they're all emailing you and saying, Mike, please send out my PDF, my marketing flyer. Please put in these materials into my move-in packet. That's exactly what was happening to every single property manager, and they were just getting overwhelmed. On top of that, if they followed what their corporate office was saying to basically send out all these amenities, because again, it was an amenity arms race. Everybody wanted the latest and greatest. What ended up happening was, they use Yardi, Entrata, RealPage, right, for the back end. Now you have a 50% unsubscribe rate, because all you're doing is sending out these different, 10% off your nails, 10% off housekeeping, so residents weren't even able to get notifications because they would unsubscribe. Mm-hmm. So, elevated living, what we do is we want that experience to be built in. So you move into a building, the same place where you pay rent, do maintenance requests, you want to book a house clean, book a personal trainer, attend events, all that's built into one system. And we go a step further. There's a million apps out there, right? I'm sure you agree.
Yes.
Basically, do rent payment and maintenance requests. So kind of our specialty, our niche is these higher end buildings where events, lifestyle, these light on-site services are very important. And we actually manage all of that. So we manage the full aspect. A lot of people say resident experience is making it easy for people to pay rent and submit maintenance. And I'm like, I agree, but that's easy to do. There's a million apps that do that. Yeah. What about the human part of it, where you need staffing and you need, an integrated experience? So that's kind of our bread and butter, and that's what we're really good at. And so, yeah, that's the full background.
I love it. I mean, as you're speaking there, I think that there is it's becoming more and more apparent. I think COVID really exacerbated this. It wasn't the start of it, but it's exacerbated it. And that is this sort of mental health fatigue that we have as a society, and that app fatigue that you just talked about. I remember the day, and it was so much fun downloading all the new apps and playing with them for 5 minutes and setting up your profile and then moving on to the next thing. But at some point, there was no fun in that, especially as you were trying to get goods and services, right, or move product around or do something like that as a consumer. So there's this mental health thing about what your offering is, but there's also that underlying health component, because the booking the fitness center and doing things like that sort of feed your life, which plays into, it's a long way of getting to a question that I have for you. You listed I think a day ago or so on LinkedIn this question. It said, what are the top 5 non-physical amenities that matter most to residents when evaluating an apartment community? And it really struck me. I don't want to list them. I want you to potentially talk through those 5 areas. They're super interesting to me.
Yeah. So essentially, there's 5 main ones that are really kind of like the ones that residents. So we survey residents, right? Like we ask what they value. Like one of the biggest things that the data that we have on our back end, because it's fully integrated, is what services do residents use? What events do they like? Things along that line, right? So, what we realized was that each resident has a different value system. For example, like I love wellness. Like I'm into fitness. I like going outdoors, working out, and I like doing events outdoors. I like skiing, right? I like going and doing things like that where you can't do that in a building, right? Like resident events are just like pizza party and wine tasting, so there's different things that appeal to different people, right? Like not everybody's going to be like me. So you can't take like a one size fits all approach, to how you do resident incentives for move-in maybe, or for renewals, or even how you kind of approach residents. So kind of the big ones that we came up with, the ones that we saw that residents really value the most, was, we kind of categorized 5 of them. So a wellness lover, someone who's like a busy professional, who's all, kind of just starting, wants to make a career, someone who's like a pet lover, they have a pet, right? They're obsessed with their pet. They want to hang out with other people who have pets. Then there's people who are entertainers, right? Which is a big one. There's a lot of people like this where they move into a building to show off. They want to show off your amenities. They want to show off your bowling alley. They want to have their friends come over. and show the golf simulator. And the reason why they pay that high rent sometimes is to show off. That's the honest. Right. And then the last one is like the neighborhood ambassador. So they want to engage with the community. That's the person that comes to every single event, comes into your office and, says hi. Those are the people that are your promoters in a sense. So, what we've done on our end is we've worked with property managers to put together like packages where, we present like, the resident can choose, like if they sign their lease early or renew their lease, they can choose from a list based on their value system, to either get, let's say they're a busy person, right? They might value saving time, right? So move-in cleaning or a regular house clean, or maybe someone to come assemble furniture for them. So we have a handyman service in-house. Someone who likes to entertain, you might want to give them like an amenity rental, like a party room rental as an incentive, right? So all these different things are, I would say, like the top 5 that like I've seen residents really appreciate when it comes to like those, gifting, right? Like rather than giving them like a $100 Visa gift card, like these are like custom strategies you can do to really kind of build that relationship with your resident.
That it's sort of riffing off of that relationship word that you just used. It's a number of years ago, short story. We were working with some architects to do a redevelopment in downtown St. Louis, and one of the words that they used, or the phrase they used, was collision points, right? And the example they used for collision points was, hey, we don't want to put a bike storage on every deck. We'd rather build a bike room that gives cause for people to come together and run into each other, right? Like-minded people running into each other in the bike room, and all of a sudden they're friends. And so what you've built, or it seems like to me, is this sort of virtual collision or cause for collision, right? For people to come together of like mind to make friends. And we all know, to the extent that you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 friends in your apartment community, you're likely going to stay longer.
Yes.
Right?
Yep, exactly. And a lot of, I think what happens is like what you're saying, the collision points, I call it basically resident engagement, right? And like, what's resident engagement? I call it, you have to create opportunities for your residents to take action, whether it's digital action, physical action, right? So, a lot of companies, a lot of apps, they do digital action, and that's easy to do because it's an app, it's a feature. You build a feature, if you have a good UX person, it's gonna work out, right? But for the physical stuff, that's where a lot of buildings are lacking, right? Like, rent payment. How often do people go in? They do that once a month. Maintenance requests. If it's a new building, you probably won't have that many maintenance requests throughout the year. But like attending events, fitness classes, booking services, chatting, starting up your own groups, even like an activity group, like a walking club. Those are things that residents do on a daily basis. And those are, I think, the biggest contributors to like those collision points you're talking about, right? Like you're basically giving them, you're setting up opportunities for them to take actions physically, right? And that's what we do.
Yeah, it's in my mind, there's sort of this intellectual component to coming together, to being able to talk about things that are of interest to you, with a like-minded group of people. But then there's this, to your point about action, there's this sort of when you actually participate in an activity with another person, there's sort of this, I call it energy that gives off, right, in the people. But that energy is what works to sort of imbue or deepen that relationship in each other. So it's one thing to run into a room and have a conversation. It's quite another thing to start participating in activity with another human.
Totally. And I have a younger brother actually, and he was in college, out of Chicago, and now he's back in Chicago, and he moved to a high rise, and all his friends are from different cities because he went to college out of state, and when he came back to Chicago, he didn't know that many. I mean, he had some friends from high school, but they all did different things. So one thing that he really likes about his building is the events. He has a whole new group of friends. They go skiing together. They go on trips. They went to Mexico together. Like to me, that's crazy, right? Like you just meet a bunch of random people in your building and you're going on ski trips to Mexico, like, but that building does a great job at doing events and connecting residents and creating these opportunities.
You know what I think is so beautiful about that, and it's, you know, your service creating a conduit of sorts for this, is that there are so many people in the world today that have isolated, and be it COVID, be it other things, but they've isolated and sort of gone into this virtual world, be it email or Teams meetings or Zoom meetings, and they sort of live their day 24/7 in a screen, right? And what's beautiful about what you do is it gives cause for people to actually come out of that isolation and to engage. I mean, I think we were built to be in community, right? And to, whether we're in community in sort of a strangeness, or if we are there because we know each other very well, it's important to who we are as people.
Right. Yeah, I think you know, me personally, like I crave, like, you know, during the pandemic, like I didn't go to the gym as much, and it was tougher. There was a lot more hurdles, obstacles. You have to go. Especially living in Chicago in the winter, you got to put your snow boots on. You got to bring your mask, and it's just like now you got to show your vaccination card. It's like all those things are excuses sometimes to not go because you're just like, I don't want to do this whole checklist before I leave the house, right? So it's just one of those things where, I agree with you 100%. I think people, like, they are their best version of themselves when they are able to be surrounded by, community, right?
That's right. And I think that plays well to, I mean, we don't call them apartment communities by accident, right? There, it really is a place where you get a lot of people in a very sort of densely packed area and space. And in my head, it behooves us as sort of the stewards of that to bring people together and to give cause for them to create those relationships and sometimes marriages and other things that are born out of
Yeah.
those relationships.
Exactly. And I know we probably have a lot of people listening to you on to your podcast here, and I will tell you, like, we do a lot of events all over the country, and people, we did a big survey recently, and people really want to go back to on-site events. And different markets, like in Florida, everything is normal, everything is wide open. Then you go to like north, and a lot of buildings have restrictions still, and but the overwhelming thing is, people are really craving that on-site connection. I think our survey, from almost 2,000 people that responded, like it was like 94%, wanted to go back to on-site versus 6%, wanted to keep it virtual, right? So
Yeah.
That speaks a lot. That says a lot, right? So I think, virtual is also a good way to engage, but it's not like a long-term solution. We did it the last 2 years, and we found that, like, it's not the same as in person.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the virtual world has a place in, going forward in our society, but I think there is I refer to it again as energy. When you come together in community, in person, with another human being, there's this sort of flow of energy that happens between two people, right? Or like a giant group of people that feeds your soul, so to speak, and it's necessary for survival. I think, at least I think that's one guy's opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. Well, Konrad, I'd like for you to certainly have the opportunity to tell our list. We have both listeners and viewers. We put this out as a podcast. We also put it out on YouTube and other channels of media. But anything you'd like to leave our listeners and viewers with before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think, I thank you for making it this far, and if you're still listening, thank you to everybody who's still on here. But no, if, elevated living, if you are interested in having a, branded resident experience app that has full integration with Yardi, Entrata, RealPage, that does all the typical functions like rent payment and work orders and amenity reservations, but you are missing that physical human powered element, and you want to maybe even consolidate some apps, feel free to reach out to me.
That's the punchline I need. Consolidate those apps.
Well,
All right,
thanks
Konrad.
for having
Oh,
us.
sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mike, for having me today, and it was great being on here.
Oh yeah, definitely. And thank you for taking the time to do it. All right. And for everyone else, thank you very much. And we will see you again next time.